to follow?
It's Kelley K Photo on Twitter. I use my existing one. I probably should have set up a new one, but it's Kelley K Photo. So I'm also on Facebook. I have links to both of them at the end. But I'll just go ahead and jump right in here. I feel a little bit out of my element. I am super new to Tableau, but I will go ahead and share kind of what I've learned and what I've found kind of as a new user diving in and trying to make sense out of the COVID data with it. So first of all, I just kind of wanted to give a little background. I'm a numbers person, math. It's kind of in my genes, I guess. And I worked in IT in various roles and did tech writing as part of that. So back when all this started, I mean, I was nervous like everybody else, seeing the numbers. I didn't really know what was going on. And I would just kind of pull up the numbers every day on the Georgia website, but they didn't have any history. So I just have to try and remember how many cases we had or whatever, and then go back the next day and be like, wait, okay, how many was it yesterday? So then I started screenshotting and I'm like, this is really inefficient. So I was like, I need to just start writing these numbers down in Excel. So I started building this Excel spreadsheet and it just kind of went from there. Oh, yikes, sorry. And then in early May, and I was just doing this for myself, just because I wanted to understand what was going on so that I could feel like I knew what was happening. And then in early May, there was this article in Forbes online that was like, cases have gone up 42% in Georgia. And I was, since reopening. And I was like, what? And I was like, I tracked the data in Excel. I'm like, that doesn't sound right at all. So I kind of dig in because, again, I like numbers. So I was like, how can that be right? What are they talking about? And then I'll get into more of that in a little bit. But then about a week later after like that and some other stuff, I was like, I just need to put this data online. And I have website hosting and stuff, so it was easy to get set up. And I just started copying and pasting basically my graphs from Excel onto the website. And it was about a month later that I wanted to get into some of the county data. And I was like, well, I don't know how to make like a map of Georgia to represent our county data. I was like, with anything I do in Excel, I was like, maybe there's like a Google Sheets like plugin or something for that. And I started trying to figure out the way to do it. And I was like, I think I need to figure out what this Tableau stuff is and try that because I'd seen some other people using it. So I installed Tableau, and like an hour later, I had a color-coded map of Georgia with the cases per county. And I was like, this is amazing. So that's kind of where it went from there. And that was just, in May. Or June rather. So in May, this was the article in Forbes, the risk of exposure is more than 40%. And it said from April 21st to May 2nd, it's increased 42%. I was like, first of all, those are just 11 random days. And it included days before we even opened, which made no sense to me. And I was like, fine, it did increase 42%, the total number of cases in that time period. But I was like, but the 11 days before that, it increased 75%. And 11 days before that, it was 300% increase. So I was like, this has nothing to do with anything. Like this was just, just a random cherry picked set of data. And that's kind of what got me really like more passionate about following these numbers and sharing them with people, because I was like, people can just say anything they want about these numbers and freak everybody out. So that was kind of what partly got this all started, I guess. It's just bad math and manipulating statistics. So basically the goal with the site, I was like, I just want to make this easy for people to understand. Numbers and things just kind of come easy to me, but I know they don't for other people. And so I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to be able to make sense out of what was happening. Oh, sorry. And I wanted to avoid anything complex. Like at the time when this started, everybody was using like log graphs and these complicated scatter plots and things. And I was like, 90% of people have no idea what any of that means. So it's not something people can just look at and make sense of. And I was like, I want something that people can just see, okay, that's a line going up, that's a line going down. I can understand that. And then just again, like with this issue with the Forbes article. I wanted some way that I could like refute things when stuff came up, to be able to be like, what is this is not right. So then the first thing I started kind of realizing, and why I switched to Tableau, was, oops, clicked the wrong thing here. Sorry about that. The state level versus the local level. And, there was one set of information if you looked at the state, but so many things were happening in a specific region or a specific county that it was kind of obscuring it. And we have 159 counties in Georgia, so it wasn't simple. Like in Arizona, they have like 11 counties, so it'd just be easy to, show the data in a lot of different ways. But with 159, I'm like, really, I need a map to make sense of this. So that's where Tableau came in really handy. And I got incidence rates for cases over the last 2 weeks put on a map so that people could see where was kind of a hotbed right then, as opposed to cumulative numbers. Because a lot of Metro Atlanta peaked, but other areas peaked at completely different times. So since testing has varied so much, cases aren't necessarily the greatest metric. So just kind of going by when deaths peaks to give you an idea. Like in Albany, it peaked in early April. The Atlanta Metro kind of had 2 peaks. But then we had like early May was Hancock, late May was Habersham, LaGrange was in July. And it just kind of went to different spots where it made sense. I really need to be able to highlight different places at different times to show people what was going on. And then the limitations of the data we have became a big issue that keeps kind of growing. There's a report date versus the actual date. And that is, based on like for symptom onset for a case or hospital admission or date of death, it's completely different as to whether, you're looking at when it's reported by the state versus when it actually happens. And then, the testing data we have is limited to only electronically reported tests. So there's a lot of tests that don't get reported. So, there's quality issues with our data that kind of have to be taken into account when I'm analyzing it. The testing data also includes multiple positives for the same person. So that skews the positivity. We actually had an issue with that yesterday. Incidence rates are also skewed by how timely they're reported. Like we had an issue a few weeks ago where we reported a ton of tests that were more than a month old. So obviously that skews what you're getting. So there's a lot of just data quality things that have to kind of be sorted out. We also didn't have a lot of stuff on the website from Georgia that we now have. Some of the things I added to my site now that are appeared on the DPH site, which is nice, which is like the county-based incident rates, testing volumes, positivity rates, age-based information, which at the time when they first started posting that, I was like, oh, that's neat, age-based data. I'll check that every now and then. And it started to become obvious pretty quickly. Oh, that's changing on a week-to-week basis, the percentages there. So I'm like, I need to pay a little more attention to that. Let's see. Hope that's making sense. Let's see, then county level maps and data. So this is where I started putting stuff in a map. This was the very first thing I did in Tableau was this active cases per 100K. Well, I had it actually both the raw numbers and the per 100K. And then new case changes. I added that at some point when somebody had asked me, well, where is it growing versus where is it going down this week kind of thing. And then daily new cases per 100K, it's a 7-day average. And that's based on a metric from Harvard as to whether you're in like low, medium, or high risk. When somebody first asked me to add this, we were basically all red. And I was like, what good is a map of Georgia that just shows everything red? So I kind of drug my feet on adding that.
Kelley, real quick, as you're going through this, the crowd would be really interested to know where you're getting your data and if it changes as you go throughout kind of the time.
Oh, sure.
So love to have you kind of give us a little bit of that context as well.
Sure. I should have, all the data I get is from the Georgia DPH website for the most part, I would say. They have a pretty good COVID dashboard. Like I said, the first it was pretty limited. They've added a lot to it. It has some CSV files that I can download with the county level data plus the overall state data. I just record off the site. And then there's a couple other places that I go to that have some kind of additional behind the scenes stuff. They have, and I link usually to most of that stuff, I link to it on my website, where you can also see like the hospitalization data now has 2 different dashboards where that's available. And there's another person who's actually done where he actually scrapes data off the graphs that are on the website. And so I use that for some of the things, the data that otherwise I'd have to like be manually getting out of their graphs. He's able to pull it down and crunch it and post the numbers where I can download it as a CSV again. So I have Excel spreadsheet and an Access database that I track it all in, going back to the beginning. And that's what I have hooked up to Tableau then. So these are just some of the graphs and visualizations I have on the website. I mentioned the hospitalization. So at first we just had the COVID patients, people that tested positive. Then I added on the patients that are under investigation, they call it. Once they added that additional dashboard, and I could get the historical data there. And I did it with the stacked graph like this. So you can look just at the COVID patients if you want, or you can look at the overall, anybody that has COVID or might have COVID in Georgia. So it's been going down a lot. We kind of hit a little plateau last week. I'm not entirely sure that wasn't just some reporting changeover they were doing from what I'm hearing. But seems like we might be headed right back down there again. The deaths, like I mentioned, whether you use report date or when the actual date of death occurred, I have these 2 graphs, top and bottom like this on the site, so that you can see the difference of how, the reporting sometimes doesn't necessarily capture what really happened. So deaths peaked in Georgia August 7th, and I have the amount here so you can see. And then this last 14 days is always incomplete. So that's why I have it kind of shaded there. But you can see with the reporting, it's not necessarily telling the same story. And like this one here in mid-June, if you look, there's this big spike in June. Everybody's like, oh no, deaths are increasing. And I was like, no, they're not. If you look at the deaths by date of death, I'm like, all these deaths that they're adding were way back in April. They're just filling in. So, they're underreported early on, and then they add to it later. Then this is one of the latest things I added. GEMA had been putting out a situation report every day, and they just recently stopped that. And one of the things people really liked from it, they were mostly just kind of restating what was on the DPH website. But one of the things apparently that people really appreciated from it, and that they were very upset when GEMA took it away, was the daily they would show like the highest affected counties by new cases, the top 20 or 25 or whatever. So when they took that down and people started panicking, I was like, well, I have that data, I can post that. So I have it where you can click on a county to see it, and I have the counties color coded by hospital region, which is how we have the hospital data broken out. So you can see the total number of cases and the new cases, same with deaths and hospitalizations for each county. Or I have it in a table that you can sort as well for all the counties, not just the top 25 or whatever. Then weekly metrics, I do like a weekly report. So I have some different graphs for that where you can see these are our cases and these are testing numbers. We had a while here where we had only estimated testing because they were mixed with antibody tests. So I have those a different color so you can kind of know those aren't necessarily the accurate. We kind of had to guess on what the testing was there. And then I also have the percent positive because again, some of our testing is underreported, but this percent positive tells us what we know as far as the tests that we do have the data for. Then this is COVID cases. I have it graphed again by the orange dots are by when it actually happened, when you either got your test or when the symptom onset was. And then the blue lines are when it was reported. So you can see in early July, we were way underreporting our cases because people were getting tested, but those tests were taking a long time to come back. So by the time all that data came back and we filled it in, we found out, oh, okay, we were way underreporting on the way up. And then on the way down, then we end up way over-reporting as we're catching up on that backlog. So it wasn't as obvious that things were falling at first. And then again, like deaths, they get reported, over time. So I started capturing at the end of each week how many deaths got reported that week from the previous week, from the week before that, and then from any prior week. So, you can see that first week is kind of predictive of what it's going to be as it's going up here, and then it started going down. But obviously the final numbers end up a lot more, about 3 times, give or take, what's reported that first week. And then this is just another way to see how that graph of deaths over time changes. Each week I'd take basically a 7-day average graph, and then I just add on, each successive week. So you can see this peak on August 7th. We were already kind of seeing a hint of that here, August 15th, the yellow line. And then it kind of kept going up over the following weeks there. But you can see now we're on a pretty good decline. And again, these initial values are too low, but they are kind of predictive of where it's going to end up. And this is another one of the later things I've added. I wanted to be able to show cases, hospitalizations, death data, but all of which have totally different scales on the same graph. So I did it as a % of the peak. So you can see first cases and then ER visits with COVID symptoms peaked in early July. And then mid-July, hospitalizations and new hospitalized cases peaked. And then in August is when deaths peaked. So you can see that time lag between cases to hospital to death, all on the same graph, versus normally if you graph the cases and deaths, the deaths are such a tiny line at the bottom on the same scale, and then if you use a dual axis, you have to come up with some number. So I thought this way kind of shows them all. This is just where they got to the max that they are and where they start falling from there. Some of the other questions I've had to kind of deal with how to present the data was either case data, either presenting it as raw cases or the per capita, like per 100K rates. The raw cases obviously shows where the highest numbers are. And that's pretty much always been, since mid-April or so, been the Atlanta metro counties because they're the biggest by far. But that obscures big outbreaks in small counties. So there's kind of 2 sides of it. The big metro counties are also going to be where you have the most deaths because you had the most cases, again, in raw numbers. But, it makes large counties kind of appear worse than they are, and then small counties kind of get hidden and don't appear as bad as they might be. So the per 100K lets you see the hot spots in those smaller counties, but then it does have some issues where some counties in Georgia are so small, they have just a few thousand people, that the smallest outbreak can make huge per capita numbers. We also have counties where the infected populations aren't necessarily in the census counts. We're seeing that in the colleges now, which is why Clark County is all lit up, and Bullock with Statesboro. But also counties with prisons, Fort Benning, we have the same issue because all the recruits.
Quick question for you, so sorry.
Sure.
I hate to interrupt. I'm not sure I entirely understand this question, but I'm just going to read you
Okay.
one that we just got. And actually, what reference was used to create hospital regions?
That is a Georgia designation. I don't know who in the state of Georgia comes up with that, but that is how they present the hospital numbers to us. And so I just captured what regions they define and organize it that way. So yeah, they're somewhat arbitrary. I'm not entirely sure how Georgia came up with them, but that's how the numbers are presented to us. We can't see on a county level basis the hospitalizations. We can only see it by region D, which is Fulton, DeKalb, and Gwinnett, I believe. So that's where those numbers or regions came from. But yeah, again, Fort Benning, I think I was saying, they have these, recruits come in and they're all, young and healthy. They've had a lot of cases, but the census, the population of Chattahoochee County, where Fort Benning is impossibly small. So the numbers there keep growing, but it's not really showing what you necessarily think.
Okay, sorry, one more question.
No problem.
All right, this is about the county data. Do you remove the non-county data? Like non-Georgia counties or unknown counties?
There's two categories. They have an unknown and they have a non-Georgia resident. And I treat those basically just like counties, like other than that they don't appear on the map. I debated a couple different ways to do that. But it always ended up weird where it looked like they were just floating off in the ocean or something. But they are in the tables and I do report on those numbers. But we were using those numbers a lot as things were peaking. I think we were using them as kind of a dumping ground for things we didn't know where to put them. And then we'd pull cases back out of there and organize them to counties later. But their numbers there have not been changing a lot for the most part, although yesterday we did have a bunch of non-Georgia cases get dumped in again. That is a good question. Then the next issue, this is one that's kind of more of the math nerd in me. There was a question at some point that somebody had posed on Twitter about how I calculated percent positive. And it was a great question. And I was glad that I felt like I had the right answer. And I actually do it differently than the state of Georgia. So I've asked them about why they do it this way. So I'll go over both ways. The state of Georgia does an average percent positive. In that case, each day is weighted equally. So I have an example here, 6 of the 7 days, you have 100 tests and you have like 4, 5, or 6% positive. But then on the last day of the week, you have 1,000 tests with 20 positives. So that would be only 2% positive. Well, if you just add up all these percents, you get 32% divided by 7 days. That gives you 4.6% positive, where again, each day is weighted equally. But if you consider that each test be weighted equally, you get 50 positive tests out of 1,600 tests, and that gives you a 3.1% positive. This is how the CDC says to calculate it and how some other states I know calculate it. This is how the White House calculates it. It's kind of intuitively just how I set it up originally. I was like, well, it's however many tests, we did in 7 days and however many positives we had in those 7 days. But for whatever reason, Georgia does it by just, dividing the 7 positive or percent numbers up and dividing by 7. So you can kind of see why that, some of the logic behind the calculations there makes a difference. This is one I included, somebody I had shared about this, trying to just, again, I'm trying to just kind of present the data we have and make sense out of it. And, when I posted this on Twitter, somebody was like, oh, this is a great example of how to lie with statistics. And I don't necessarily think it's lying, but I do think it presents two very different pictures. So I thought it would kind of be good to mention. This is from the HHS site the federal government has, showing, and this is data is from a few weeks ago, but again, this is kind of when this came up. And so I just kind of saved the example. They report it based on the percentage of beds that are occupied by COVID patients out of your total beds for the state. And they do some estimates. So I'm not entirely sure how accurate their numbers are. But they were saying Georgia had like 26% of our beds filled with COVID patients. And, other states were all much lower. So you can see where Georgia's like dark purple on this map and everybody else is a lot lighter, which obviously presents kind of a scary picture for Georgia. But I was like, that just seems crazy because I know what the case data is like for these other states. And I'm like, we can't be that different than everybody else. So I looked at it, and according to their data, Georgia had a lot fewer hospital beds per capita than any of the other states. So I downloaded their data and added in the populations for each state and instead did it per capita. And then Georgia, instead of being number one, we were fourth, and we were like much closer to some of the other states that were also peaking around that same time. So again, it's two, I mean, I think they're both valid ways to present the data, but they definitely tell a very different story. Either we're much worse than everybody else, or we're kind of about the same as other states that are, not, with high cases and high hospitalizations at the time. So it's still not a great story, and really the bigger issue then is, why do we have so many less beds?
One more question.
Sure.
Okay, Kelley, sorry. So Mark Jackson is asking if you've looked at the correlation between positive results at whether positive tests in younger people are a leading indicator of hospitalizations and admissions in older people.
Well, we've seen, we had a lot of cases in younger people this summer. And, we saw somewhat of a wave where we had more cases in the younger and then more in the older. But then as school started back up, then we started seeing more cases in younger people again. So it's been kind of hard to say exactly. And again, these are also affected by report date. We don't get that age level data based on when the cases actually happened. But I do every week make a note of the age stratification of our cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. And there are some fluctuations there. But I haven't seen anything enough to really kind of say definitively what's going on. I will say in August, early August, we had a lot of cases in young people as schools were starting back up, like in the very young people, I mean like teenagers, as opposed to like young adults. And so deaths right now are dropping off faster than cases because, we're about a month out from that, where if that bump in early August had been older patients, we would be seeing more deaths now than we are. So some people are like, how come deaths have dropped off so much? I don't believe what's going on. People that are a little more pessimistic about the data. But when I've looked at it, I'm like, well, it makes sense to me because those early August cases had a lot of much younger people in them. So again, we're kind of still too early to know weeks after that necessarily what might have happened. These are just kind of some of the tips and things I've keep coming across that kind of like make me a little crazy sometimes. But I thought would be some things I would just kind of share. I just said like sanity check everything. I've seen a lot of people that post stuff, or either they're posting their own graphs or they're reacting to their graphs. And it's a matter of somebody just didn't look like that number makes no sense at all. There's no reason why that number would be so out of whack. Like instead of just posting it and assuming weird, it's super high today, like digging in and going, well, why is that? So that's why I also have like investigate, anomalies and outliers instead of just like, oh gosh, it must've been terrible today. Like, let's dig in. Like, was it really, or, what? It makes no sense that number would have gone up when everything else is going down, those kind of things. And I've just seen a lot of people, with the confirmation bias issues. And I try, that's, anybody's going to have that. I try as much as possible. I have a pretty optimistic view of things. So when I see numbers that look really good, I try to say like, okay, does that, is it just because it's a low day? Is it a weekend? Why would this number be lower than I was expecting? But I've also seen on the opposite side, people that are more pessimistic. A big number will come up and they're like, oh, see, it must be terrible. And I'm like, again, like, let's dig in and see what's going on here. Instead of just going, oh, that, that's what I think should happen. And so let's just jump on it. Again, with the sanity check, like don't over rely on automation. I've seen a lot of stuff that just gets pushed live, like on the DPH site, we've seen this. And I've seen other people, I had a graph somebody had posted and he said what he was like, well, the median here is whatever. And I was like 6 or something. And I was like, almost all the data is under 6. Like there was a bar graph. You could see all the data was like heavily weighted to the small numbers. And there was like nothing after 6. I was like, I can just tell visually, like the median of that is not 6. And when I went back and forth, them eventually was like, it must have been my program, must have been calculating wrong. And I was like, again, that's where you can, sanity check it, not just rely on whatever the computer spits out must be right. make sure that you put in the right inputs and that it did the right calculations. And and then again, don't jump to conclusions. I keep seeing people, a lot of this, of like, when there is like a couple times when there's been mistakes where I'm like, obviously somebody just pushed the wrong number to the DPH site or something strange happened. My general rule is it's probably not a conspiracy. It's probably a mistake. Just because I've worked in IT for a long time, I know things like that happen a lot. Yeah.
This is excellent, Kelley. I'm so sorry.
We're running up. Okay.
No,
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Oh no. A few more minutes. Okay. Thank you. This is really good content.
I had my clock up here trying to keep an eye, but I guess
No, I think everybody loves it and really appreciates like just all these good questions that you're asking and like the way that you've approached it. The insights are awesome.
So,
but continue.
There's just like 2 slides, so I think we're good here. I'll wrap it up here. This is just, I thought was interesting, a projection of somebody I follow on Twitter, and he's actually one of the people that has the CDC projections he submits to the CDC. So this was the IHME projection that recently came out that said we were going to have like 400 and something thousand deaths before the end of the year or something. And a lot of people were like, how could that even be possible? That shows deaths start going up almost immediately, and nothing indicates that. Well, sure enough, they're already like 2 weeks in out of their confidence interval, whereas YYG, he has a name I can't pronounce, so it's been going down almost exactly like his line would indicate, his projection, and it's because he's followed the data. He hasn't followed, his thoughts on what he thinks it's going to do. He's just followed, well, the data says this is what it's been doing. And so I just think that's been a really good to see. And he's changed his mind on some things about how much better or worse he thinks it's going to be, because he says, well, this is what the data says. And then this was just kind of humorous to me. This Cobb County put this out. So I didn't feel too bad since it's not a specific person, but they have June and then July, the numbers for hospitalizations get bigger, and then August, it gets smaller again, but they put a linear trend line on it showing hospitalizations just getting worse, which made 0 sense to me whatsoever. So that was, again, of like, let's do a sanity check on this. Like, does that trend line really represent the trend that the data actually is following? And then that's it. So, sorry, I kind of went a little long here, but I hope that that was really informative. And I'm definitely on Twitter all the time. And yeah, I've got data posted to my website daily and a weekly update. So if anybody's interested, definitely check it out.
Thank you so much, Kelley. Like, I think I speak for everyone. Like, we really enjoyed this presentation. It was super interesting and just great job with everything that you're doing. Thanks for what you're doing. I feel like this whole time, it's really hard to find this type of data. Like, you just don't know who to trust with some of this stuff, even the news. And your site is a really good resource. And it's hard to believe that you just found Tableau and you're able to do all this. So great job.
Yeah, I still feel a little out of place presenting on it, but
you did.
I really am quite new to all of this, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm like constantly going, whoa, look at this, you know, and like pulling in data and making even things that don't necessarily make it to the website, but for my own use to be able to look at the data and, you know, model things different ways and see what's happening.